All right. I was trying to figure out why my hands were shaking. Then I realized we're talking about PyTools and Node tools for the very first time at a Build conference. Conference dedicated mostly to concentrate on .NET languages and C++. And we were nervous whether anybody will show up actually at our talk. I'm so happy to see you guys. Last talk, last day. So give yourselves a good virtual hand. So we're going to be talking about Python and Node.js in Visual Studio and Azure. Node.js, let me just do a quick calibration. How many people have used Node.js as a hobby project? Check it out. Fantastic, just about maybe 80% of you. And how many of you are considering professionally using it on your day job in the next year or two? Wow, same amount, about 80%. Perfect. And same thing on Python. How many people have used it, dabbled with a side project? Again, awesome. 80%. And same question, professionally, how many people are considering using it? Wow, this is really impressive. Great. All right. So Node.js, just apparently everybody knows what it is essentially decoupling of JavaScript from the browser so that you can use it in different scenarios. Server-side, web apps, network apps, command utilities even. And Python, Guido's language from a couple of decades ago, more than that now. Another scripting language with probably a wider spectrum of scenarios. They've become extremely popular in the past, especially in the past 5 years or so. And this is why you should consider using them. Attributes they're free and open source, which is always a good thing. They're both quite cross-platform. High-quality implementations exist on Windows, Mac, and Linux. And it's not just about the scripting languages. Yes, it's nice to have a scripting language with the, the REPL feel. But it's the quality, the depth, and breadth of the packages that come with the environments. Just about any domain you look at, there's something for you that you can just tap in, import, blah, and suddenly it's kind of like Matrix. You take a pill and you know karate or know how to ride a bike. Communities are extremely vibrant and active, wonderful conferences. In fact, we're going to be at PyCon next week in Montreal. If you're out there, please come say hello. Microsoft is a major sponsor. They're both very good at website and service development. Each one has its forte, which we'll talk about. And of course, both are dynamic programming languages with its pluses and minuses. In terms of popularity that I touched upon, this is from RedMonk. They gather information from Stack Overflow and GitHub and a couple other places and rate how popular and active languages are. In the top right-hand corner, you can see that Python and JavaScript are essentially have been for the past 5 years in the top 8 or so most popular languages. How popular? For example, on Python side, you see who's who of Fortune 500 using Python. Bank of America, Merrill Lynch, and Goldman Sachs of the world. In Wall Street, use it for quant work, all the way to Hollywood using it for scripting, the processing of their digital assets. YouTube is very popular. High traffic is all Python. NASA looking out for us to make sure we're not hit by giant asteroids. Reddit, everybody's favorite pastime, top-down Python. EVE Online, where a few weeks ago they had a massive online, hundreds of thousands of people shooting at each other. To Dropbox, both on the client side, on Mac, Windows, and Linux. They have their utility and also on the back end. We were at PyCon a couple of years ago, and one of the PSF members mentioned that they were looking at their download stats, and from python.org, which is where you go to get CPython, which is one of the main Python interpreters, it was downloaded 21 million times. And this is just CPython for Windows. And you usually get your interpreter from distros, like from Enthoughts or Continuums and so on. So these are pretty significant numbers. Same thing on Node.js. Again, you see who's who from eBay, PayPal, Walmart, Microsoft. All the cross-platform utilities that you see for Azure, they're all done in Node.js.
And we even have things like Windows Azure Mobile Services, which support Node.js now, and of course Azure supports it. So it's something that we're actually investing in pretty heavily.
Great. So as far as why Node.js, we sort of touched on it. If you've already done some investment in JavaScript and you've done a lot of training, it would be nice to have the language both on the front end and on the back end. It is a very good setup for doing concurrent network apps. Basically, it's a collection of Google's V8 engine, libuv for doing some of the OS abstractions like I/O completion and so on, an event loop, and a number of built-in modules such as an HTTP server. All these together basically give you a very nice stack for doing that kind of work, a chat server, a real-time web app, and so on. And like I said, there's lots of web framework and other utilities that you can just npm install that give you all the magic of Node.js. And you have to like async callback style.
Although that's getting better as JavaScript advances and grows things like promises, Node's going to pick that up, and so it's going to be pretty good, even if you don't like the async callback style of programming.
Yeah, the other day I was trying to explain what async callback style programming is to my friend who's done a little bit of programming. I said, you see this web page has got a bunch of links all to photos. You can click on each one and wait for it to come, and then you view the next one and the next one, or you could just control-click on each of them as fast as you can, each one opening a separate tab. And this being Node, you can just keep an eye on when the hourglass will stop spinning, and once the photo is loaded, you can switch to that tab, consume it, that's the callback, and Control W and get rid of it and go on. And said, I get it now. So, and why Python? Python has been a bit around a bit longer. Its core scenarios can be divided into three parts: general scripting and programming from desktop to websites and so on. And websites being the second one. And then they basically own and rule the whole technical computing and scientific computing. Stuff that you used to do with MATLAB or Mathematica and so on, a lot of it is just migrating to Python, thanks to very, very high quality packages out there like NumPy, SciPy, Pandas, and so on. Another reason you might want to use it is you like one of the frameworks. Django being a very full-featured CMS framework, all the way down to micro frameworks like Bottle and Flask and Pyramid. IPython, I'll touch on that a little bit later, but think of it as a super REPL with views on Qt consoles, terminal, and in a browser-based notebook.
And we have support for that inside of Visual Studio as well.
Yeah. And everybody here, well, most people here, I assume, do some .NET programming. If you like Python, you can just choose one of the many interpreters you have, one of them being IronPython, and you can very easily talk to C# or F# or any other language you like. And Python, in general, just plays well with others. So let's say you want to do some work with Python and Excel, bunch of choices out there. Pivot, Pixel, Data Nitro. Simply, let's say you want to grab the logic out of your spreadsheet model and run it on much better speed on a server, be it a Linux or a Windows server, you can do that.
It's not just limited to Excel either. Python has lots of COM interrupt features, which makes it great for Windows, so you can automate all of Office and just about everything else.
Yep. So yes, they're similar but different. You know, Node.js, you can, at the higher bit level, look at network apps, and Python a little bit wider, anything from machine learning to web to just doing general scripting. So here we come to Azure. If you looked at the downloads and Developer Center on Azure, you see lots of choices. The two we're talking about today obviously are Node.js and Python. You can npm install the Node.js one, and you can pip install the Python one. You don't have to do this on Windows. They're available for all OSs. You don't even need to touch Visual Studio if you don't want to. You can build awesome apps directly in those languages on Azure. So we come down to NTVS and PTVS, Node tools for Visual Studio and Python tools for Visual Studio. In order to have a Node.js IDE, you basically need three things. Obviously, you need Visual Studio. You need the Node collection runtime, and you need NTVS. Those three together give you a Node IDE. I'm happy to announce that now we can install NTVS into the Express web edition as well. This means you have a full-featured IDE, perpetually free, available to you. Same thing for Python. Pick a Python interpreter, doesn't matter which one. Could be PyPy, Jython, IronPython, CPython being the most popular one. Get Visual Studio, click Install PTVS, and you've got a full-featured Python IDE. And Python is installable in the Express editions as well, not just web, but desktop as well. So you can have C++, for example, with Python right there.
That actually requires 2013 update 2, so you might need to upgrade your VS. That was released as an RC this week, so keep that in mind if you want to try that out.
And I'm happy to announce that the bits for the 1.0 beta of NTVS went live minutes ago. And the 2.1 beta for PTVS will be available next week at PyCon. And if you want to look at something that's stable and RTM'd, the 2.0 bits are available on CodePlex. So yeah, this basically says that these are open source.
Including PTVS and NTVS, and we accept contributions to both of them. So if you have anything you want to change, just send the pull request.
Yep. So let's talk about the actual support in Visual Studio. These are high quality. We like to think that these are high quality integrations of these languages into Visual Studio. So the stuff that you expect, such as project system, IntelliSense, debugging, profiling, Azure support are all there. Let's take a look at a screenshot of PTVS. By the way, we'll get to demo all this stuff. Just want to do a quick do a breadth first coverage of the features. So here you see you've got Python on the left pane. You've got C++ here in the middle, and you're doing mixed mode debugging. This is a feature that's unique to PTVS in Visual Studio. I can't quite see the stack here, but it says Python, C++, Python, C. Why would you care? Like Python is interpreted, it's fast enough for most cases, but generally you end up profiling and something showing up as a bottleneck. You can rewrite it in C++ or another language, and now Visual Studio allows you to just very seamlessly debug between the two.
And we're the only IDE that has that feature. So it's really quite unique and awesome.
Yeah.
And it's enabled due to just the great debugging infrastructure that VS has.
Fantastic. So on the right pane, here you see the REPL, the read eval print loop. One of the cool things that we've done is interface with the IPython machinery, the super REPL that I talked about. And as you're interactively building your code or model or whatever, you can graph it, you can have output of different types coming back to the REPL directly inside Visual Studio. Another cool feature is actually beyond just debugging your C++ and Python code, is actually remote debugging on Linux and Mac. You might, let's say your company acquired a startup that has done a boatload of stuff on Linux, in Python, and they're running on Linux servers. You can actually bring that stuff over, load it up into Visual Studio, debug it, use all the goodness of Visual Studio, and if you're still deploying it on Linux servers on Azure, remotely debug it right from Visual Studio. Again, a unique feature of PTVS. And I'm also happy to announce that, actually, now that Roslyn's out there, I'm not sure whether this is true or not, but up to about when Roslyn was announced, PTVS had become the most downloaded Microsoft project on CodePlex, and that was kind of cool.
It's actually still true. Their download isn't on CodePlex. So
yay, OK.
We squeak out on that one.
Fantastic. And I keep referring to IPython, no relation to IronPython. So IronPython is the implementation of the Python language on the .NET runtime. IPython, which I think stands for Interactive Python, is let's call it a super REPL. In this view of it, you're looking at Python inside the browser, but not just your typical in the browser execution. You can have what's best described as executable notebooks. For example, if you have a scientific paper from Euclid's time up to PDFs today, it's essentially some text and some, maybe a picture or two, and these days, some code. Very static. With IPython, notebooks, you can actually give somebody a URL and a password, and they have full immediate access on any OS, on any browser, to your algorithm or to your model. And it's not just code, like I said. Here you see Markdown for text. You see MathJax rendered formulas. These are code cells that you can shift, enter, and execute. And you can get graphics or video or a sound bite or anything back as a result. Why is this exciting? You can have the engine running locally on your thin laptop, working on maybe a few gigs of data. And once you've built up your model, you can just point it to a big fat server in the cloud. It could be a Windows backend or a Linux backend, doesn't care, it doesn't matter. And you can run it on a terabyte of data. In fact, let me go off script and see if I can. We had a notebook that we demoed doing facial recognition. Basically, this is a machine learning algorithm. You feed it some faces, and then you do an eigenface, basically find out the core features of each face, and then go ahead and feed it some more new faces and see if you can figure out who was who. And it did a pretty darn good matching, about 80% or so success. Actually, I should probably, let's see if I can. So here you can see if I'm on this line, you see there's a markdown. You can give it the different kind of headings. This is a code page. I'm executing this, and it says, welcome to PyLab. Here I simply add a couple of more cells. Let's say, and you have actually full drop-down help and completion in this environment as well. So you can say plus, and you can see all the help that you need. Linspace, let's see, give me some numbers in randomly 4 times, let's say pi, give me 5 samples. And once I shift enter, I get the output right here. Let's assign it to a variable. Great. And let's say, let's see what x squared would look like. Fantastic. Let's see what that looks visually. Let's see, plot x. Nice. Not very pretty, but 50 samples. That's getting a little bit better. Let's go for 500. Yeah. So this execution, if you look at this URL, is actually happening on Azure. I think it's a Linux VM. Could be Windows. I'm not sure.
And the great thing is you can share this out with people. You can collaborate with them. It's great for researchers where they're actually trying to work and build up a paper or something like that.
Yeah, you'll see a lot of universities have started to actually give out their papers, homeworks, exams. O'Reilly, I believe, published a book completely in IPython. So you'll see a lot more of this out in the wild. The reason I'm bringing this up is this part of it we actually have implemented using the same protocols that they have inside Visual Studio. So let's go back to that. And that's where you get this right here. OK, so let's alt tab to Node now. Sort of the same story. Free and OSS plugin into Visual Studio. It is installable in the Express Web editions. We're very happy to announce that TypeScript support has been added now, which means full TypeScript, fidelity, debugging, profiling, IntelliSense, everything. So if you want to do some serious app scale development, TypeScript is your friend. Exactly like PTVS, we have debugging for both Windows and Linux on Azure. And we've got some cool contributions from the community. Edit and Continue was donated by Dmitry Tretyakov. And NPM Package Manager, the entire thing, including UI, was donated by Bart Reed from formerly Redgate Software. So here's a screenshot. Here's your typical Node code. Here it is broken in the debugger, talking to the Google's V8 debugger API. And here's your NPM packages. And here's your little REPL, which you can actually go up and down and edit. Again, we're not going to have enough time to demo all this stuff, but some proof of pictures. Here you are attaching to a process that's an actual Linux VM up on the cloud. And if you do the process.platform, you see that it's really Linux. And if you're actually doing websites, you can just right-click and say attach debugger. So this is like C# level integration of this stuff into Visual Studio, including the coolness of having REPLs and interactive development. So enough slides, enough talking. Let's jump into some demos. And this is Dino Wieland, the tech lead for the groups.
All right, so here I am inside of Visual Studio. Here I have my Python interactive window down in the bottom where I can just go ahead and start writing code. This is similar to what we saw Shroak doing in the browser. Print ABC, it prints, great. I don't know how many people, their first program might have been 10, print hello, 20, go to 10. You can get the exact same experience inside of here. And I feel like I'm on an Apple II with all the great interactivity there. I can stop that execution and do other things. One of the nice things about the REPL here is the multi-line editing experience. So I have multi-line history. I can build up functions. I can go in and edit my code. So it's much better than if I was just working at a command prompt where you typically have single line input. It's really pretty rich. I can go through there and see what I've done so far.
Dino, so which of the REPLs are you using here?
So this is the IPython REPL. The way you can tell that is by the special prompt. This is something that IPython has done where they keep track of how many inputs you have. And if I have an output, they precede the output with the out prompt as well. And so if you're used to a more normal Python experience, you are pretty used to this prompt. The other great thing about IPython is it can actually be used as an interactive shell. So if you just want to avoid that context switch and do something very quickly, I can do bang dir and look at where I'm at, or %cd and navigate directories and look around. So that's a handy tool to have. One of the things about working with a REPL is obviously you're not just always in the REPL. Sometimes you're writing code in the IDE, and then you want to test something out inside of the REPL. So I can come up here to this editor buffer where I have some matplotlib code. I can go ahead, select all of it, and just send that to the interactive window. And there we get to see a nice, pretty interactive graph. I can select it, resize it, and see a big version of it. So we get this nice inline image experience. I can check things out and see them visually in addition to just writing some raw code. We also have a IronPython REPL, and this is a pretty cool feature just even if you're not a Python developer. If you're a .NET developer, you can use this to explore .NET APIs very quickly and see what they're going to do.
So you just switched from CPython to IronPython, right? You can have multiple interpreters going on at the same time.
Yep, and in fact, if I go to View, Other Windows, you'll see I have a number of interactive windows set up here for different versions of Python. 2.7, 3.3, 3.4. You can install all of the interpreters you want. If we don't automatically detect it, you can register it as well. So you can see I get IntelliSense here against all of the .NET classes. When I'm in the IronPython REPL, I can import path, file, whatever. I could add references. I'm just going to do file.exist real quick here. I'm going to pass in none, which if you don't know is the equivalent to null in C#. And I see I don't get an argument null exception, which is kind of nice. I can pass in something that has invalid file name characters. And so if I was just too lazy to go and read the documentation or disconnected from the internet, I can actually see what file.exist does and see how permissive it is. If I have other simple APIs, I can quickly call them, explore them, and see how I'm going to work with them. So that's something that's kind of unique to PTVS and NTVS. If you saw Anders during the keynote yesterday, he mentioned that C# interactive is coming at some point. But right now, this is a great way. If you like interactive development, you can experiment with it today. So I'm going to switch gears. Here I have a small demo app that I've written that is working with Windows Azure. Actually, before I do that, let me show you a simpler app. Let's start with Hello World. So I'm going to make a blank Azure app. And this is your typical Node.js Hello World app. So if you've ever looked at anything with Node.js, you've almost certainly seen this code. Here I have a call to require HTTP. And if I were to try to do something with HTTP, you see you get a great IntelliSense experience with it. If I just wanted to do a require call here, I get a list of modules that are available. As I build up my project and add my own modules, those will get filled in here, and you'll get IntelliSense against all of those modules as well. I can set a breakpoint here in my handler, and so this is going to run every single time someone requests a page from my server, and I can hit F5. We'll run, we'll launch the browser, we break in, I can have my usual VS debugging experience, so I get the call stack, I can inspect things in locals and watch.
And we get it. Woohoo. Did we mention this is beta software? Yeah, we could have gone with the RTM stuff, but that's not exciting. Fresh bits.
My page still got served. That's kind of nice. So at least Node's fairly resilient, even though the debugger detached at some random point in time. So let's do that again real quick. Create that project again. Not sure why that's going so slow, but set that breakpoint. F5. I swear this didn't crash the bazillion times I tried it before.
I was there. It's telling the truth.
Run, breakpoint, continue. Hello world. But that's not really what I wanted my app to say, so let's refresh this again. You'll see we hit the breakpoint again. I'm just going to go ahead and change this real quick to hello build, because that's where we are. F5, and we'll continue. And we've updated the code, sent it to the server that's running. And so one of the amazing things that we have inside of NTVS is actually edit and continue support.
Did you write that code?
No. We actually, all we had to do was accept a pull request. So this is great. So we have active contributor has been giving us a lot of improvements to the debugger, Dimitri. And between him and the V8 team at Google, this is all of their work.
If you want to ship something in Visual Studio, this is a great way to do it. Just send us pull requests for your favorite feature or bug fix.
OK, so let's look at a slightly larger app. One of the things about JavaScript is it's a dynamic language, and it's a very loose dynamic language. So as you start building larger apps, you might want to use something that will scale a little bit more from the development side. And so for our beta release, one of the features that we added was TypeScript support. And so you can see here I have my TypeScript imports and all of that. This is also an Express app instead of the low-level, plain old Node app. I can do things like go to definition, which works in JavaScript as well. But I can also do things like find all references, which doesn't work in JavaScript. So you get a much better understanding of your code. You get a much better IntelliSense experience. Things like this route here, I can come in and do request dot, and I get IntelliSense against that. And that's something that's just really hard to do with JavaScript, because it's hard to know who's actually calling this function when you get into this extremely dynamic language and you're going through all of this framework code. So TypeScript will really help you scale, and then it compiles down to idiomatic JavaScript as well. So it's a pretty good experience. This app has a bunch of dependencies as well, and that includes the Azure library, of course, because it's an Azure app. You can see the Azure code here where I'm actually doing a query. It's got a bunch of dependencies on Express and Formidable for doing some form stuff.
How did that come about, by the way?
That was another contribution. That was from Bart Reed. He used to work at Redgate. And it's a great set of UI that lets you not drop to the command line, install modules, see what's there, see what's out of date.
By the way, we have videos, extensive videos on every part of this product. Go on YouTube and search for NTVS or PTVS. Those are the tags. and you see lots of tutorials on.
OK, so let's see the app rather than me just
What does the
speaking
app
about
do,
it
by the
vaguely.
way?
So it's a simple image upload app.
Like Imgur?
Exactly like Imgur.
That got $40 million of investment yesterday?
Yep.
I have $40 I can give you for some shares in case this goes viral.
Their app's better, actually.
No, is it? OK.
So it's a TypeScript app, so it'll build here. And then it'll go ahead and launch, and we'll bring up the browser, just like we saw with Hello World.
Is this going to be running locally or on Azure or what?
So right now, it's just running locally, but it's still talking to Azure. So this is using Azure Table Storage, Blob Storage, and Service Bus Queues. It uses table storage to track the images which are uploaded. It uses blob storage to store the images in Azure. And then it's actually going to use queues to resize those images. It would have helped if I would have shut down my previous node.
So which, for all this Azure work, what did you have to use? What SDKs and so on?
So this is the Node side of things, and it's the Azure SDK for Node, which you can npm install. It's developed on GitHub. And on the Python side, we're using the Python SDK, which is also developed on GitHub. And both of these take, I believe both of them take contributions. Certainly
Yeah, they're on
Python
GitHub. They do. So technically, I could take this code, which is cross-platform, do some debugging and editing, and work in Visual Studio, take it over to my Mac, and do the same thing talking to Azure, right?
Yep. OK, so I can go ahead and select an image to upload here with this beautiful UI in my favorite shade of blue. And we get the image uploaded. I can go ahead and navigate back to the page. And we see the thumbnail of the image. And this is actually, if I go to Properties, we'll see that this actually has thumbnail on it. And that's because it actually got resized. And we'll see that code in a little bit. Or I can click on the image and see the full-size image. So that's pretty nice. But I don't really just want to run my app locally. I actually want to run my app on Azure. So getting this app to Azure is really simple. If you've ever done any .NET Azure development, it's the exact same experience. So I'm going to deploy to Windows Azure websites. Right-click on Publish. There's a bunch of options in here that I can choose, configuration, and so on. I'll just go ahead and go with what's already set up there and choose Publish. And this is going to build again, and it's going to take all the files and deploy them to Azure.
What if I want to use GitHub and do a push from GitHub?
So
I'm sorry, Git.
If you want to use Git, that's absolutely supported. What you need to be careful about is creating your project. You need to just make sure not to create it in a new directory. There's an option when you create your project there. And then you can just use Visual Studio's built-in publishing or built-in Git support. And you do a Git push, and it goes up to Azure, and there you are.
And on Azure website, you have to go and say enable Git publishing.
Yep, you'll need to set that up first. So this is going through the publish step now. And in a second, it should be published. And we will go ahead and launch the browser against it.
And if I'm doing a change and subsequently want to do another publish, do I get to repackage everything and send it up again, or is it just a diff?
Nope, the publishing is pretty smart. It'll only publish the actual files that have been changed. So here you can see that we've gone to Dino build node. And in a second, the page loads, and it's the exact same image because that image was all uploaded to Windows Azure storage. Instead of being stored locally, I can select a different image and upload that as well, and that works just the same way. OK,
Great.
Let's see that exact same app, but this time it's going to be in Python. So,
which framework are you using for this one?
So I'm actually using Bottle here. We have templates for Django. We have templates for Flask. If you have a different web framework that you like more, we'll actually work with generic web frameworks as well.
It should be probably noted that for Django, we have some sweet support for debugging. Like you can put a breakpoint in that Django template and actually debug your template.
Yep. So you can see I'm getting the exact same images that I've uploaded before. I'm talking to the exact same Azure storage. We're using different libraries, but storage is all the same. So there's nothing kind of language specific going on about how it's getting uploaded into Azure. I could also consume this from C# or VB. If I wanted to make a client app on a phone, I could consume it from Xamarin, whatever. One nice data store that can be used everywhere. So Python, we have kind of all of the great same things that we have with Node. So here I am in the editor, and we get a great IntelliSense experience against this. We actually go ahead and analyze your entire program and flow the types through and do whole program analysis to know what's going on. So if I were to do something simple like f of 42 and dot through it here, we understand that that's an integer that's coming back out. If I were to change that to a string, we'd get that too. And we give you string completions against it. And so this is a rather simple example, but we propagate types through core data types like lists and dictionaries and all sorts of stuff. So you'll get a very great IntelliSense experience when you're working with Python. Python has a great feature that is called virtualenv. And this is how we deploy your app to Azure. So you want to use a bunch of libraries with Python. I mean, that's one of Python's great strengths, is there's things like NumPy and SciPy and the Python imaging library. And you can create a virtual environment, and you can install all of your libraries into there, and then we can just deploy that virtual environment up to Azure. We actually have Python on all of the Windows Azure websites already, and so you just run against the Python that's there, but you're running in your virtual environment with all of your dependencies.
We should probably mention that Python is available in the Azure Gallery as well. So you can just directly go to Gallery and say you want to set up a Django app and take it from there, never having touched Visual Studio.
And again, we have templates for other frameworks like Bottle and Flask up there too, I think. So here you can see my virtual environment. This is similar to NPM. The nice thing about Python is I can actually have multiple of these inside of my project. I can switch between them quickly. You can install different libraries, different versions of libraries, different Python versions. If you're developing against multiple Python versions, quickly switch between them and check things out and see how they're going. So just like Node, I can also publish this app. And here we have the same publish dialog. And we're going to do the exact same thing. That went a little faster. That's kind of nice. Here we are running on Azure. I can once again select an image, upload it, and voila. I can come back here, and we can see that I have all the same images that I've been building up all along and all the same storage. So I'd mentioned before that we're using Service Bus, and we have a worker role that's doing this image resizing. And so that is actually all happening on the Python side of things. I don't actually have a Node implementation of that, just because it was much easier to do this with Python with all of its great libraries. So here I have this thumbnail worker, and I have this cloud project. So one thing that we're not really showing much is we also have support for cloud service, web roles and worker roles. So right now I've been publishing to Windows Azure websites. But if you want to create a durable VM and have all of your site on there where you can kind of configure it more and have more control over it, you can do that as well. And so that is actually how this worker role is set up. This will actually be a new feature for Python in our beta 2 release. So this is kind of a little thrown together.
In about a month and a half or so.
Node has worker roles already built in. It's just the template is missing for Python. So here you can see I'm connecting to Azure. I just receive a message from my Service Bus queue. And that message is just going to be the ID of the image which I've uploaded, which is just a GUID. And I'm just going to go ahead and pull that out of my table, get the blob from the image, open that, one call, I've created my thumbnail, and I save it, and I put it back into Azure blob storage under the thumbnail name, and update my table so that I know I have the thumbnail there, and that's it. That's all it takes to actually have this worker roll. And so each time I'm getting an image uploaded either from Node or Python, they're actually submitting this queue, this message into the queue, and the resize happens. So that's Python, and I'm going to now quickly switch back to Node to show you one last awesome feature, which is remote debugging. So here in Server Explorer, I have my websites that are all deployed, and here I have Dino build node, which is where I've deployed my app. This actually requires the update 2 of VS 2013 to get this attached debugger menu item here. You can
Which is available now.
Yep. Well, the RC is available.
Yep.
If you don't have update 2, you can still do remote debugging. It's just a little more involved. We have a video about it. But I'm going to select attach debugger. And we'll go ahead and attach to the remote website. And I can set my breakpoint here. And if I switch over here and start loading the page, it's loading inside of VS. But I've hit my breakpoint. I can come over to my watch window. And here's process.env computer name. I swear I did not name my local machine RD some horrendous number. We're actually up running on Azure, debugging the service live.
Fantastic.
And that is about all I had planned, actually. But I think I have a little bit of time, so I think I'm going to show you one other last cool thing that we have, which is actually profiling support. So we have this for both Node and Python. Whenever you're actually starting to build a large app, at some point you're going to have some issues with performance. And we make it pretty simple. I can come in here, launch Node.js profiling.
Now you're really going off script, you know.
Let's hope that the demo gods don't strike me down for it. They already had me have that one crash.
Yeah.
Node launches. We have our site come up with, I think someone uploaded an image.
Good job.
Thank you for not making that be a horrible image, and I appreciate that. I can refresh the page a few times and close it down before someone does upload a horrible image. Shut down Node. And in a second here, we'll go ahead and open the performance report.
So then now you're talking to Google's V8 profiling APIs, right?
Yeah, so profiling API used very loosely.
Yeah.
They write out a log file with all of the profiling information, which we ultimately parse and feed into VS, jumping through a few hoops along the way. It's kind of crazy. You can see a couple spikes in here of usage. It's not too interesting. This is a very simple app. One of the nice things here is this app is, of course, written in TypeScript, and there's no TypeScript code that's actually running in this process because it all gets compiled down to JavaScript. But of course, the profiler is aware of the TypeScript code. So as I drill into what the hot functions are here, I can click on the function name, and we'll bring up the source code. And you can actually see that this is the real TypeScript code that we're showing you instead of the JavaScript code.
What about the fact that things get rejitted on the fly? How do we mark those?
So I'm not sure that we actually had that happen here, but V8 is this extremely optimizing JIT implementation. And so it'll start inlining methods inside of other methods. And so you'll start to see things disappearing. Sometimes you'll see a function which shows up a little bit, and then when V8 kicks in and re-optimizes it, some of those functions will start disappearing. So you'll actually sometimes see your function name with recompiled after it in parentheses. And that will help you at least have a hint about what's going on, because once that stuff starts disappearing, you might not see the functions that you actually are expecting to be in your profile.
Great. Thank you, Dino, for the demos. So last slides. This is where you go to get the bits, pytools.codeplex.com, aka PTVS should find it. Docs, videos, issue tracking, everything's there. Same thing with Node.js, nodejstools.codeplex.com. And last slide, just an invitation. Please join us on CodePlex. If you have a cool feature you want to contribute, we take pull requests. If you want to implement something and need some consulting, just let us know and we'll be happy to help you along. One of the things that we've done with our group, there's no PSS. When you post an issue or have a question, you're talking directly to the developers on the team. So we've built a pretty good relationship with the community out there. And maybe you're dabbling with your own new language, or you want to do some cool new scripting language, whatever, and you don't want to spend a lot of calories on the scaffolding. It's very easy to fork the code base and just start integrating your own language in there.
That's exactly how we created NTVS. It was originally a fork of PTVS, and we just kind of ripped out everything that said Python and replaced it all with Node.
Exactly. And it's become a pretty good code base for consulting on how to integrate stuff into Visual Studio. Yes, there is docs and so on, but here's real-world code that you can check out and use it as a guide. And here are some of the links. Go to python.org, ipython.org. Shout out to Fernando and Brian and Min for IPython, and of course the Node.js guys and the MS OpenText help for getting it on Windows.
And please give us your feedback.
Yes,
it's very important, and you have a chance to win something. So
yes, we'd like to come back next year with more awesome stuff. Hopefully, we'll have 2 separate talks and go much more in depth on each one and how to integrate Node and Python into your existing workflow. And that's it. If you have any questions, thank you.
Thanks. Can you go to the microphone?
So the first question was, can you post your sample code? Absolutely.
Yes.
We can put it up on CodePlex for you.
It'll go up on the Node.js on our beta release.
All right, so this question applies to Node, but it might work for Python too. So if I have other developers that are working on different operating systems, like they're working on Mac using WebStorm to do their Node development, how well does that integrate if I have developers using the Visual Studio tools?
So we have a feature called Project from Existing Code. So you can just point it at a directory, we'll slurp everything in, and create everything that you need so you can get going immediately.
Okay, and does that work for updates as well? So they're adding new files to the solution?
What might be more, so for Node in particular, we have this show all file. Python has this as well, but it's a little more important for Node. There's this show all files feature, and Visual Studio has had this for some time. If I switch over here, in Solution Explorer, there's show all files. This actually tracks everything that is in the directory. So you could have an empty solution file, and you don't actually need any of your JavaScript files in your project for us to recognize them for IntelliSense or anything else. You can just turn on Show All Files, which is on by default, and you can start opening those files and working with them, and they don't have to be in your project at all. Okay. And that was really important for Node modules, because you don't want those in your project, but it'll work just as well with other files.
One warning is Windows has this max path issue, so try and name your stuff into very short directories in the beginning, if at all possible. We are working on this problem. We hope to have a fix sometime in the future, but right now it is an issue.
Okay, thank you.
Sure. Question?
I've used like Node Inspector to do debugging for the server side before, and I noticed like sometimes the debugger gets out of sync with what the code going on the server side, or showing a different line it's at or something like that. Do you notice any similar problems with the VS debugger debugging with VS, or?
I haven't. We don't prevent edits to the files, and in particular, if you're talking to a remote server, things can be out of sync. We match on file name. I haven't seen it happen, but
Well, And Zach did a fair amount of work to keep the editor, the debugger view and what's going on really in sync, because where things start, where they end, and you know, what you're really pointing at is a tricky subject. And he had to do quite a bit of work to make sure things are in sync. So that's the reason you haven't seen it, is because he did spend a lot of calories on that front.
That was particularly around breakpoints for the most part.
Yeah.
So if you've seen it with breakpoints in particular, that'll definitely be a problem that we've solved.
Okay.
If it's just other things, we'd love to hear if you hit it, and if you do, we'll take a bug report and fix it.
Okay, great, thanks.
Thank you.
Hey, is there any plans to bring find all references to JavaScript rather than TypeScript? Because I mean, WebStorm's had it for at least 2 versions now, possibly 3, I think.
Yep, so right now we are relying upon the JavaScript analysis engine that it ships with Visual Studio. We are considering options on how to improve that. So we don't have anything to say right now, but we might have something to say in the future.
So second question,
Okay.
is there any proposed implementation for like unit test projects for Node or task runners?
Yes, so we have unit test support right now. It's extremely primitive in the beta, where it's just exported functions can be run inside of the Visual Studio Test Explorer UI. We're going to add support for more frameworks going forward. We took some changes at the end to make it vaguely extensible, or so that we can at least extend it without breaking existing projects. As far as task runners, things like Grunt, we've been talking to other teams internally about how we should best expose that inside of VS. Today, you could tie those together using MS Build, so that MS Build invokes Grunt whenever you're doing a build. That's pretty easy to do from MS Build. But we don't have any plumbing yet. So what we're kind of thinking, there's a lot of different task runners, right? And so what we're thinking is we really need some generic mechanism inside of VS to allow people to plug in their task runner of choice and then make that an extensible mechanism, and then we'll probably ship support for the most popular ones.
Somebody's working on a PR, from what we understand, for Grunt. We'll see where it goes.
Cool, thanks.
Thank you.
Thank you.
When I deploy to Windows Azure websites from for an ASP.NET app, it will NuGet package restore. When I do the same thing for Node, it will npm restore. Where's the support for Python?
So we need to add that. So for Node, it's doing that via Kudu, and I'm hoping we will get that in by the time PTVS 2.1 ships. It's not a change that we need to make to PTVS, actually. We just need to wire up Kudu so that it understands that something is a Python deployed package. And we have all of the virtual env support for packaging, saying these are our dependencies, and we just need to get the server side up and running. So that is definitely something that is high on our priority list.
Cool. That'll be most welcome.
Yes, it's totally necessary, especially for cross-platform development.
Thank you.
Thank you.
One last question.
One more, maybe slightly off topic, but with Azure Mobile Services, is there going to be any JavaScript IntelliSense options coming into Visual Studio for that?
Zumo is, for the most part, it's a Node app, right? So they have some extra Node modules that are installed on the server, and they've removed some Node modules that they're not available to you. You could bring your code into VS and use it, and you just have to be aware of which modules are available and which modules you're not getting IntelliSense with. We haven't worked through all of the details of making a really good, seamless development experience for that. And there's also the debugging side of things. You probably want to be able to attach to those services using our debugger. They build on top of websites, so in theory, we're pretty close to that. I wouldn't expect it for 1.0 of NTVS, but it's something we've had some discussions about, and I'm sure we will have more discussions about it and hopefully actually do something soon.
Become a squeaky wheel. I mean, a lot of the stuff that you see that are there now is because somebody said, I need this. That's how they got done. So please file a request and see how many people voted up. And we definitely pay attention to those.
And tell all your friends to vote it up too.
Yeah, there you go. Get a bot. Awesome. Any other questions? Fantastic. Enjoy your weekend. Thank you for coming to the last session of the last day.
You said you would put the samples on your CodePlex?
Yes, it'll be on node.jstools.codeplex.com, and it'll be on the 1.0 beta release download page.
Thank you.
Thank you.